God bless everybody tonight. It's September 19th of 2023. This is a quick update. We've got a Fed decision tomorrow, which I believe, I may be wrong, but I believe if he wants to destroy the markets, he will raise rates. The 2-year bond is still melting up, and I will show you some of these numbers and charts so you can see what's happening. We have now crossed a 33 trillion mark that are on the books. That's not derivatives that are off the books, probably closer to 300 trillion in global debt. If you break it down from, country to states to counties to cities and everything, this country's in a mess. And there's no way they're going to bail us out of this $33 trillion mark as we get ready to have a showdown on the shutdown of the government at the beginning of the month in October. So it's interesting that we've actually crossed this. It's amazing how this national debt is accelerating and growing. If you really watch it, some days it really jumps pretty high, and this is why this debt's adding up so quickly. So as you can see, this is the national U.S. debt clock. You can come out here and see lots of different numbers and things like that. The ones that I pay attention to most and probably affects us just as much is basically this is the national debt. Okay, that's the 33 trillion, and this is the tax debt that each of us owe the government to pay this off. So based on the population, we all owe as a taxpayer $254,961, and this is exponentially growing as we speak. You can see the GDP to debt ratio, which is 122.41%, and so you'll realize, as I'm going to show you this calculator as we move forward here, that we are now at 122.41% debt to GDP ratio, which means we spend more money than we bring in every year. And one of the reasons is because if Jay keeps raising rates, he has to service this debt here. And when you look at that calculator, it's amazing what those numbers actually show us. So if you go out and just put in 33 trillion, I had to count all these zeros because if you actually go to the debt clock and look at it, you have 4 sets of zeros prior to the actual number. And so when you go to the calculator and you type in all those zeros and you take it times if he raises, now if he doesn't raise, it's 5.25 and he pauses. But if he does raise, and I believe he probably will, I may be wrong, I believe that he's going to push this market to an extreme pain situation. And so in a year, we basically service just about half of the money we bring in revenue, which is about 1.815 trillion dollars is being sent every year to just service the debt. That is no money getting paid down on programs or anything like that, salaries or anything they're paying their government employees. That is just servicing the debt because we cannot figure out how to stop spending. So I always move you back to the 2-year bond because in the history of time, the Fed and the Jay Powells of the world have always followed the 2-year bond. And when it melts up, as it has, and you can see this melt up, we've actually increased over the original melt up. Back a few months ago, we're surpassing this. Jay's concerned at 5.25 that if this melts up above that, then he's going to be in trouble. So he's going to look at that and go, do I need to go to 5.5? He's talked about actually raising to 6. And that's a real problem because if he keeps raising these rates, all of your home mortgage loans that are revolving, all loans are going up, your credit cards are going up, everything is moving up because the rates are moving up. you're refinancing loans as they revolve through. And so if you took out a 7-year loan 7 years ago and now you're in this rate environment, you may just have to turn in the keys to that car or to that house or to that business, because you just can't make these kind of payment increases that they're requiring from you. And the banks aren't loaning because they're at a 2-year inversion on the 10-year. And so when they're borrowing at 2-year at 5 and they're loaning at, let's say, the 10-year here, let's go to the 10-year and look at that. This is where a lot of the loans are built off of. They're at 4.363, so that it's an inversion. They're borrowing at a higher rate than they're loaning, and so they're not loaning, and they're tightening these loans, and the banks are also requiring them to hold more money in place, which is putting a lot of stress on these banks. So with the banks being required to hold more money, and they're borrowing against the outflows of people taking money out of the bank, what we're seeing is a trend that's moving us into a physical recession, which you can see on this chart. And I want to show you what I mean by that. So I go to the Fed economic data charts. This is a good place to look at things like the discount window, which is basically the banks are borrowing to hold money in place in case they have a run on the banks, and see what happened before this recession in 2008. We saw this heavy borrowing, then he paused. This is the pause, and then we went into a recession. Same thing over here in 2018. We started to move up, we saw the pause, and then right after that we went into a recession. You're doing that here. This chart may not be finished because he's not ready to pause. He may be moving up, and so this could keep going up till he decides to pause. Look at that. We're around that 6% mark that he's been talking about in history. And so if you go back in history, when we get into a chart that looks like that, he's looking back at this historical data, and it is data driven. This is what he's been talking about. Everything that he's going to talk about tomorrow in the meeting will be about data, and you'll hear data driven information multiple times in this conversation in this conference that's moving forward tomorrow. So some of you are locked into a 30-year fixed load, and this is just a good example. It's over 8% now, and if they keep raising these rates, these are going to keep moving up. We're going to start looking at possibly double-digit numbers as we move forward, and no one is going to buy a house usually at that level because it's very restrictive, and the banks are going to loan to certain people, and they're going to have you require you with a lot more money down before you can actually be able to actually secure the loan. So this is a real problem for everybody, and this is even worse on the foreign market because they've locked them into a shorter term loan, and so these revolving loans happen sooner and the rates keep moving up, and so they're having to refinance over and over at higher rates. And so the foreign markets are in a complete disarray, and as they keep moving these rates up. Now, will he raise? That's the question. If he doesn't raise, then he's just going to pause and maybe raise again, and that's where we get into this, is he going to be dovish or is he going to be hawkish? If he's going to be dovish, he might pause, and then they might start to reduce rates. If he's hawkish, then they may either raise or pause and then raise again as we move forward. So you have to look at that. And if they do raise this time, as we're walking into the Feast of Trumpets, or actually the fall feast on the Jewish calendar, the Feast of Trumpets started on September 15th, and that runs through the Feast of Tabernacles, which ends on around October 6th. So that's to me, a high point to be watching because we're talking about the fall feast. A lot of people believe this is a rapture event during this time. I don't believe that. I've talked about that many times and how I believe that would happen in 27 during those same calendar events. So we're having this rate potential increase or pause now. He's not going to reduce. He's going to probably be somewhat hawkish. He'll tell you it's all data driven, but they're looking at potentially raising rates, and the reason is because of that 2-year bond melt up. Then we're going to have another meeting, and so this is a fairly large lag between the 20th of September to the beginning of November. Okay, so he's looking out a month and a half in advance. He's looking at that 2 year, and he's trying to decide whether he has to keep moving up as that 2 year bond melts up. And I believe it's going to keep melting up in this environment. So just realize that this is a very pivotal meeting, and there's a lot more going on in this meeting than normal, and I'll explain why. So this is an article about by Forbes. I didn't go through the whole article. What I did want to look at, though, is he's possibly going to raise these rates. And so we're going to see this at a real problem if they do, because it's just going to place stress on everything as the markets, or as the economy is literally slowing down. We're starting to watch massive unemployment occur, and this is the pain that he's been talking about. It's working. He just hasn't got to the limit of pain that he wants at this point. So they're going to look at the data. You got to watch this meeting, because that's going to dictate the markets. Whether he raises, that will dump the markets. When he comes out, if he talks hawkish, that will dump the markets. If he talks dovish, that will then raise the markets. And so there's a lot going on here. Another thing that is happening during this meeting is that they will actually release their economic projections as we move forward. And this is a summary of economic projections that they will look, that the policy makers look at as we move forward, and this is going to play into that debt ceiling dilemma that we're going to have around October 1st as we move into that meeting of end of October, November 1st, and that next potential policy rate hike that they could. And so what could happen is they might pause now and raise at the next one as that 2 year bond melts up. So we need to see that, and then right after that they're going to have this press conference, and Powell will dictate the demeanor as he talks. So the markets may react right away if he raises, or they may not react immediately, because if he pauses, then they're not really sure what he's going to do, and they'll be waiting for his minutes to come out. And so he'll basically sit there and tell us how it's all going to be data driven, and they're looking at specific things, and inflation's moving up, fuels are moving up, everything's moving up. So but their cores moved up, and so certain indication of inflation have moved down, but anything that matters to us on the ground have moved up. And so the other thing we should be looking at are the job numbers, to see whether they're actually reducing people's jobs, and they're being released and let go. And so that's going to play into this. You have the student loan coming due at the beginning of October, and so that on average is going to force people to come up with an extra $400 a month that they normally wouldn't have to. And so all this is starting to catch up with the population all at once. So the question tomorrow will be, what will Jay do? Will he raise? If he does raise, I believe that he is literally trying to destroy the prior system. The fiat dollar will collapse over time, and they are going to move us into that crypto system that they've been wanting to compete against the BRICS, and how the world is dividing into an East and West division. And potentially the fiat currency dollar could be a regional currency over time as we move forward. So we'll see how this all works out. You also want to keep your eye on the Fed now, the SDRs, because that might be the type of crypto system that they actually move us into to compete against the BRICS. And they're going to change this balance sheet, because the one that they have is basically exploding on them. They cannot hold this debt down. They cannot figure out how to stop spending money, and they can't quit easily in this original system. They can't keep printing money out of thin air. So they're going to reset the balance sheet, and someday they're going to shut the banks down. They're going to tell you to turn all your paper money in. So just keep an eye on all that. There's a lot going on out here. Tomorrow is a pivotal day as we work into the debt ceiling debate. If they shut the government down, that could complicate everything. To me, that's actually not a bad thing. Then we can't spend money, but it shuts a lot of services down. and puts people out of work temporarily until they bring the government back up. McCarthy is challenging the debt ceiling. He's talking about a possible extension for 30 days to the end of, I believe it's October. And so that could happen where you just see them kick the can down the road again, or they may try to hit this head on, and we could possibly see them actually watch the government shut down in the middle of everything else going on during the fall feast, Feast of Trumpets, which I believe is potentially a time when you see Turkey invading as he's getting ready to leave the EU, and we're watching multiple bombings going on along the Syrian-Iraqi border. And actually, the Iraqi government just went to Turkey to try to get him to quell some of this because it's becoming extremely harsh over there. I always look at specific Jewish dates. Yom Kippur is coming up on the 24th. That is the Date of Atonement. That could potentially be a breakout date as we walk into October and the end of the Feast of Trumpets through tabernacles of basically, let's see, Feast of Trumpets started on September 15th. It runs through Yom Kippur, which is September 24th, through Sukkot, or Sukkot, however you want to say it. I'm not sure exactly. It's the best pronunciation. That is the Feast of Tabernacles, and that runs to October 6th. So keep an eye on those dates. It's extremely important as we move forward. God bless everybody. Have a great night. Open that door to Jesus. He's the only one that can get you to heaven. So if you don't believe in the Son, you probably aren't going to make it there. God bless. Have a great night.